See you at 5:50. We're only going to spend 5 minutes at the tech center. I'm going to be at your house at 5:45. We'll go there.
All right.
Okay, I got
Good
to your house at 5:45.
evening, everyone, and welcome to the Adams Brothers podcast.
Testing.
We are here this evening with Mr. Dan Herz, a local resident here in Deerfield Beach. Mr. Herz is going to be discussing the Florida Live Local Act, SB 102. That was signed by our governor. And it's a somewhat complicated. And Mr. Herz would like to come on and discuss the SB 102. So, Mr. Dan Herz, good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the Adams Brothers podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Daryl and Wayne, and I can't thank you enough for inviting me on, and I'll try to keep it exciting and not bore everybody with all the details on this Live Local Act, but just kind of hit the highlights and how it can affect us, hopefully for the better.
Right. So, Mr. Herz, before we get started, just tell our audience a little bit about you and, give us a little bit of your background. I know you're a little pressed for time today, so go ahead and tell our audience and our viewers a little bit about you,
For
sir.
those who don't know.
For those that don't know you.
No problem. I was born and raised in Chicago, and just 40 years ago, actually, just celebrated my 40-year anniversary of moving down to South Florida. I went to work.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm a native at this point. I graduated from Indiana University, and a bank that's no longer in business down here called Southeast Bank recruited me to come down. And I didn't know a soul, but I knew that it was better to spend your winters in Miami instead of Chicago. And that's why I say 40 years later, still here. I got to Deerfield Beach eventually. I first moved down. I was in South Miami, then North Miami, then Davie, Plantation, and then I made it up to Deerfield Beach. In the year 2000, I bought out of foreclosure a little 8-room motel right on A1A, about 8 blocks south of Hillsborough. And so that's when I discovered the jewel of Deerfield Beach. And I fell in love with it so much that in 2017, I moved here permanently. And I've been very active for many years now in city affairs, and try to keep an eye on everybody.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a public watchdog. I can tell you that much. And that's a good thing, too. Yeah. We need to keep an eye on our politicians at every level of government.
Yes.
You know? And they need more people like you and us,
Yes,
so
no doubt.
Yes, sir. So again, we know you're a little pressed for time today. So let's start out by discussing the Live Local Act, SB 102. Could you just give us some insights on SB 102?
Yeah, I think the best thing to start off, this will be like the only time I ever read something during our interview, but it's just like one quick paragraph that I thought really summarized it well. So the Live Local Act was approved last year to alleviate the state's housing predicaments. Although some Florida areas have struggled with an affordable housing shortage for decades, the issue was exacerbated starting in late 2020 due to an influx of out-of-state residents and record rent hikes. The crisis is especially pronounced in South Florida, a major recipient of the influx of residents, which experienced record rent hikes from 2020 to 2022. So basically, here in many areas of Florida, we're what we call rent challenged, where so much of our take-home pay goes toward paying rent. And the state was aware of this, and they were looking for a way to basically generate more supply and of affordable housing, and to incentivize developers to build more of this product, with the thinking that the more supply, the at least it could make a dent in the affordability issues. So this Live Local Act, which was actually it was enacted last year, but I'll talk about some changes that they had to make to the law to make it accomplish what the law was originally set out to do, took place, and that was just approved in this last legislature session that just ended. And they're waiting for the governor to actually sign the bill itself so that it can go into effect July 1st. So, so what this law it's to try to generate more supply of affordable housing. And what the developers can do is, if they set aside they have to set aside at least 40% of the apartments that they're building for affordable housing. It can only be rented by the affordable housing people. And how they define that is that you have to rent it to people who make no more than 120% of the average income in Broward County. So to use easy numbers, that average income is a little bit more than $80,000. So they have to rent it to people who make no more than $100,000 a year. And they have to set aside 40% of all the units for these people. And
is that for a single person or a couple?
No, couple.
Okay.
Combined. Yeah.
Okay.
What they'll call a combined family unit.
Okay.
It has to be making that much. So the idea was they're giving the developers a lot of tax incentives to do this type of building. And so originally, when they put the law in last year, they were three big things that they gave the developers to incentivize them besides the tax breaks. They told the developers that you can now build residential on any property that's zoned for industrial or commercial. So that wouldn't stop them any longer. As long as they were building the residential with a 40% set aside, they could now build on any commercial or industrial zone property in the city. The second thing they did was that they said that developers could build a building as high as the highest building within a 1 mile radius of that building. So that meant obviously that they could build normally a higher building, as long as they could, no matter what the code, what was on the code of the city, if they could find a building that was higher, then they could build that high. And then the next thing they said was that the density could be equal to the highest density allowed currently in the city. So, for example, Deerfield Beach, the code, they can build up to what's called RM25, which means you can put 25 units per acre. So now, if there was a zoning that was less than that, now the developers could build up to that RM25 designation. So those were the three things that the law did last year. But because of something that I'll try to explain as simple as I can, the law didn't really have the effect that the legislators wanted, because the legislators forgot to change one thing. And now in this new bill that they just passed, they changed something called the floor area ratio. of a building. And I'll use some actual numbers to explain this, but the law now says that you can have a floor area ratio 50% higher than what the floor area ratio maximum was in the past. So, for example, let's say I owned a piece of land, it was 10,000 square feet. On the barrier island here in Deerfield Beach, you could only build a building that took up 40% of that land. So you could build a 4,000 square foot building on your 10,000 square foot of land. Now, this Live Local Act change, a modification comes along and says, nope, now you can build up to 150% of the floor area ratio. So in my example, now I can build a 6,000 square foot building, where before I could only build a 4,000 square foot building. And so that big difference to a developer is the difference sometimes between whether they can build something that's profitable or whether they can't build something that where the numbers make sense. And so this has now with this change, the legislators feel it will open up to allow developers to go ahead and build, because now the city cannot challenge the developers on this floor area ratio, on height, and on density. And as I said at the beginning, they can now build on any parcel that was previously zoned for commercial or industrial. So I know it's a lot, but I hope you understand these changes and what it's supposed to do.
Right, right. It's just the percentages, that the 40%, and now you can build more. I think that's where it becomes a little complicated, and you really have to study it. Just by hearing you say it, my head started to spin a little bit, but the more we start analyzing it, it'll become more clearer.
How do that affect us here in Deerfield Beach?
Okay. Well, it's going to mean different things to different areas. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to talk about District 2 first, and what kind of an effect it'll have on District 2. And in my opinion, I think it's going to potentially have a very positive effect on District 2. So, for example, if you now have a developer that wants to build an apartment complex, let's just say, for example, on Dixie Highway, before the city could block that development for a number of reasons. And now the city won't be able to block those developments, based on height, based on density, based on floor area ratio. And you can have, let's say, a mixed use development on Dixie Highway, as long as at least 65% of the whatever they're building is residential. So, for example, if I were in charge in Deerfield Beach, I would tell the developer, hey, I want you to build something where the first floor is retail. And then you can build on top of that, you can build apartment units. And my thinking would be, hey, if you're building that retail concept on the first floor, first of all, it makes it easier for people to go and walk to whatever the retail is there. They don't have to jump in their car. But more importantly, it would create jobs, because that retail component is going to have to be filled by a lot of workers. So I think it could really have a positive effect on District 2 and maybe get some building going on. And then if you combine that with something that I've brought up many times before during commission meetings, if you give a property tax break to, let's say, that first developer that to get him in, where you say, hey, Mr. Developer, you're not going to have to pay Deerfield Beach property taxes for the first 5 years. and try to incentivize that first developer to come in. And then if it's the right developer and the right project, then hopefully more will follow.
Right.
And so, I think that could really, really be a game changer in District 2.
Yeah, especially along the Dixie Corridor there, where there's so much development that can be done over there. I mean, you're seeing it everywhere. If you go Fort Lauderdale, up in Boca Raton, Delray Beach, you're seeing more and more of these buildings going up where the businesses are downstairs and then people are living upstairs. And
you see a lot of that in New York.
A lot of that in New York
up north.
Well.
You see that, especially in Baltimore. I was in Baltimore, and I saw a lot of that. A lot of the business, the retails, and the apartments. Housing was upstairs.
Correct. Yeah. And as long as 65% is residential, you could have up to 35% retail.
Mm-hmm. Right. What do you think the problem is, Mr. Herz, along the Dixie Corridor, why we haven't been able to get any development? I know you was talking about the new land use, but what do you think, in your opinion, the problem was in the past? Why we wasn't able to get development along the Dixie Corridor?
Well, I think a lot of it, and I learned a lot about this by going to some of Commissioner Preston's district meetings, that there's a large level of, I can't put it any other way, but a large level of distrust that exists between the landowners on that have the land on Dixie Highway, and distrust of the city, and a feeling that if the city comes to them with any type of plan or proposal, they're basically trying to steal their land. And as a result, any kind of overtures that the city has made to them in the past has not gone over very well. So I think that's probably the number one cause. And then also the city has not been willing, as I said, to give any type of a property tax break to new development that would come on in. The city has spent, they've had the Pioneer Grove project about 5-6 years ago, and now they just passed a second Pioneer Grove project, which they're hoping will incentivize development on that corridor. But I've argued that those millions that they've spent could have been better spent on giving a tax breaks to the developers and giving them the incentive that way to build. But right. I just feel that the current administration, there's just a level, and some of it is for many years, some of it recent, but there's just a distrust that unfortunately exists, and that's why the landowners just they don't want to hear about anything that's brought to them by the city.
Well, and I also heard myself, as far as a lot of the land owners, it's so many different relatives or family that is on the deeds, and that has been one of the reasons too, where they can't come to agreement whether to sell, to lease, or whatever. I also heard that too in a lot of meetings that I know people that went there and attended. They were giving conflicting information about, and that's where I think a lot of distrust come from. I think you offer them the right price, I believe they will sell. Yeah, I think that's what got to come about. They got to offer them a price that the landowners feel is fair to them. That's what I think. From me living here, I think that's what more or less the problem is.
And I have another idea. Like if I was advising those landowners, I would tell them, don't sell 100%. Do a joint venture with these developers and hang on to 10, 20, 25% of the project, so that you will also benefit by whatever is built. And that way they either agree to that or you don't sell the developer the land. So you keep a piece of it And that will, I think, also help to maybe help with the mistrust, because you're going to be a partner with that developer. It's not going to be, they're going to buy your land 100%, wash your hands, and you're never going to have another say in the matter ever again.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just joining us, we're live with Mr. Dan Herz, and he's here discussing the Florida Live Local Act, SB 102. And we've been talking about, some of the things that's in the Live Local Act and how it's going to
affect all cities
development here in Deerfield Beach and cities around this state. So, anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Hertz, to your presentation here to us?
Yeah, what's interesting so much about this is, as I said a couple minutes ago, I think this law is going to help a lot of areas of Deerfield Beach. But now I just want to, in closing, bring up an area of town where this actually may hurt Deerfield Beach. And what I'm talking about is on the Barrier Island over the bridge. One of the things that gives Deerfield Beach its small town charm is that we don't have the high-rise buildings that you see in Boca and what's now really being built in a big way in Pompano. And you have that beachy small town feel. And this new law has the potential to allow big development on the Barrier Island. And that's something that I'm certainly not in favor of, but could change the whole ambiance of the beach area. So that's an area where you have to be very careful and see if there's a way to fight this mega development and not have it go there. There's other places in Deerfield Beach where it's sorely needed, but not necessarily on the Barrier Island. So
right.
Don't we have a referendum that stopped the high rises?
The variances.
Didn't we have? I know we had a referendum on the sale, like anything over $750,000. But didn't we have a referendum a while back, maybe 2015, almost 20 years ago, that will stop that? Or will this Live Local Act trump that?
Right. Well, yes, the original Save Our Beach group was instrumental. This is now a little bit over 20 years ago in getting that referendum passed that limited height and limited the floor area ratio. And quite frankly, they saved us from overdevelopment on the beach. Unfortunately, this new Live Local Act trumps the local referendum.
I figured.
And that's why we have to be so vigilant on this and see what ways we can fight, because I assure you the developers will be coming. This law has been characterized, especially with these changes, as a very, very friendly developer law. I guess they had a lot better lobbyists this time around, but why it's so important for us to be careful, because there's certain areas of the city where this is going to be very beneficial, but like on the Barrier Island, it could really, really harm us.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I remember the Save Our Beach people years ago. They fought hard to keep that overdevelopment down. When Larry Deachin, the city manager, Larry Deachin, was here, because he was pro-development. He wanted to put buildings up, and they wanted to slow it down over there. And now you have a law that trumps city local law, and because county trumps city, and state law trumps all, county and city. So I'm pretty sure these developers are rubbing their hands together right now. They could see that money. There's no land here. I mean, you can only tear down what's there or go up.
Yeah,
that's the only, and it's not enough housing here in Florida.
Yeah,
correct. So I mean, the intentions of this bill were very good.
Right.
It's just that you have to watch now that it's been manipulated, and you have to make sure that it's not not taken advantage of by developers.
Right, right.
I remember at the last meeting we was watching it and they were talking about the Live Local Act, and I heard the mayor, he was very concerned. He just kept asking, does it affect the Barrier Islands? He must have said it about 2 or 3 times. So I know he was very concerned about your concerns too about the overdevelopment on the Barrier Island. So I know he was very concerned about that. And
Correct. Yeah, we left off. He had instructed the city manager to schedule a workshop for everyone, including the citizens, to participate, so that it could really be more hashed out and maybe a plan put in place with public input of what to do here.
Okay.
So how could they? What, to your expertise, Mr. Herz, what at this time can they do to stop it beyond talk to the elected officials to try to get them to put some type of stipulations or exemptions in there? What can be done at this point
go
right
to
now?
The state representative and talk to them,
Well,
right?
Yeah, I think that the ship has sailed already, but what the city does have a few little things that they can hold the developers to that haven't been changed, like setbacks, for example. So there still is a little bit of control, but if I had to put a percentage, I'd say 80 to 90% has been taken out of the hands of the city to control. And that was the point, that they wanted to eliminate the barriers so that more affordable housing could be built.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you being an activist, is that good or bad, what you just said about taking a lot of the power out of the hands of the local elected officials here? Is that good or bad in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of that, because what affects us may be totally different than what's going on in Jacksonville or Orlando. So the more control you have locally to shape your own destiny, the better. But the legislature doesn't see it that way.
Yeah. And I've seen some good things come out of that, especially here with the mobile food trucks. Because I remember growing up here, we used to have the ice cream truck, and they banned it back around 1994, 93, 94. They banned the ice cream truck, saying the kids was running behind the truck, and they banned the mobile food trucks. And then I know in 2000, I believe it was 2020, the Florida legislature, which I'm thinking it's very good, where they overturned that and made it harder for the municipalities to regulate the mobile food trucks, and that was one good thing, I'll truly say, that they did, because I remember right in the middle of a pandemic where the restaurants was closed, and I know probably a lot of the business owners were complaining, Mr. Herz, where the food trucks were out on 10th Street.
Yeah.
And we couldn't go in restaurants because they had closed, them down. So they were doing us a service. And then all of a sudden, the business owners of the mobile trucks, we would be there talking to them, and they were complaining that the city was harassing them, their words, trying to overregulate them. And I took issue to that. I mean, I went off one night at the meeting, because I mean, you can't, on one hand, tell a person to pull themselves up by the bootstrap, and then on the other hand over here, you're trying to overregulate them and keep them from making an honest living, where some of these people here came from where they had been in trouble before and were now trying to lead a good life. And I saw the city of Deerfield at that time trying to overregulate the mobile food trucks at the time. So that was one point that I think the Florida legislature did get right. I think they did get that right on that point, but a lot of other things, like you say, they missed.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
We've been talking to Mr. Dan Herz about the Live Local Act, SB 102, and how it's going to affect certain parts of Deerfield, and
municipalities.
other municipalities across this state. So, Mr. Herz, we know you're a little pressed for time, like we said, and we want to thank you for coming on the Adams Brothers podcast. And,
Anything else you want to say, Mr.
Anything
Herz?
else you want to say before we let you go?
I just want to thank you again. I really enjoyed this, and I hope maybe you'll have me on again in the future.
Come back. I mean, if it's something in the future that the public needs to know or it needs to be explained, you're welcome to come back.
One final question: do you think you may run for office?
Oh no! Listen, I went down that path once already, so I don't think I'm going to go down that path again.
Enough said, sir. Well, thank you. We've been talking to Mr. Dan Herz. Thank you for joining us. Come back and talk to us sometime here in the near future, and enjoy the rest of your evening, sir.
Will do. Thank you again.
Welcome. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.